of Spirit Walking with Asa Hoffman, and this is Perspectives on the Reemergence, the series that we're on. No martini glass tonight. I know, I miss it, but there's no Mike Kelton to drink my martinis with, so no martinis tonight. But tonight will be no less exciting and no less fun. I think, was going to be one of our most interesting guests to date with me tonight. Her name is Aoife Anastasia. She's an esoteric artist, performer, ritual maker, but Aoife is also just an incredible human being, so much heart and love. I have not actually spent that much time with her, but have had the pleasure of sharing a wonderful meal and just been connected for a while now in the whole psychic realm. But she came into my life through Michael, actually, and through musical theater. And Michael connected with her in London and was like, oh, wait, you and Asa need to know each other. And of course, it's Michael, so he wasn't wrong. Anyway, welcome, Aoife.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for saying yes.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
Really exciting to have you here. I actually have my iPad with me because I did, like, there are certain subjects where I'm like, I definitely want to cover those topics tonight with her. So I don't usually make notes, but I did put some subjects on there. You know, you probably already read it in Aoife's bio if you're listening, but she's, we put in the bio, or she put in there that she was living and performing in London and across the UK. I don't know that she put in there. As a matter of fact, I know she didn't, but I'm going to tell you, she is a West End actress, which, if you don't know that, that's basically the Broadway of London. And she's performed in the musical works of theater writers and composers like Stephen Sondheim, also Andrew Lloyd Webber. And she's, on top of this, a photographer. She's a trained opera singer, started a little too young in her life. She's a playwright, and she's just a magical, mystical woman. And to me, I think that she's the quintessential Renaissance woman, and just across so many spans. And we didn't even begin to scratch the surface of the psychic stuff. So, and the spiritual, sort of, all of that. So, which we'll get to as we go along. But that's my intro. So I hope I haven't embarrassed you too much, but I just feel like, it's good to give people context and to know, like, I've got this amazing, interesting woman that I'm gonna get to as much as I can in the short time that we have, but wow. So anyway, needless to say, I would like to really talk to you a little bit about, I thought where we would start, I usually sort of wrap up with and ask people more towards the end about the reemergence and what they think it's about and how to sort of go through it in their perspective. But I'm actually going to start there with you. And I'm going to start there with you for a reason. Because it's more, I'm going to tell you what I think. And I want you to talk a little bit about your journey. So one of the things I think is it's really about all of us learning to listen to our intuition, to be more in tune, inward tuned in our relationship to the external. And you have a very significant story, I believe, that led to you being in Ontario right now. And I think it has to do with listening to your intuition and stuff. And I thought, what a great example, even though it was pre-COVID, but of course directly relates to COVID in this time frame. I thought if you were open to sharing it, that would be like a really cool place to start with how you got there.
Absolutely. Yeah. My COVID started a year earlier, as most of the things in my life do. Maybe it's the oracular work or what have you, but I get a lot of heads up early on. Sometimes to my own chagrin, I can trip myself up knowing in advance. But this particular decision, I was asked to come here to do a lecture on March 17th on my great uncle, the Abbey Theatre playwright. And I have this certain thing on my timeline when there's an inevitable event coming towards me that cannot be avoided, but it's major. It feels like a pane of glass coming towards me, and I know it can't be missed. I can't go around it. I can't go under it. It's something either personally very important or globally very important. So this pane of glass is coming towards me, and I was thinking, oh God, what is this enormous thing? And I sometimes call it the bug on the windshield, and I'm on the highway and I have no choice. I'm going to meet this thing. And I made this choice in a reading for someone else, actually. And I went, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go do that lecture. And in that moment, the pane of glass shattered. And I was like, so whatever I've done, I've massively changed my trajectory and my destiny. I've done something. And it's just one lecture. I had a light bag packed, come in, come out. But since last April 2019-ish, I've been like, what is April 2020? What is it? And I didn't know why or what I was doing, but I was slowly saying goodbye to a lot of things that we don't have now. Like, I gorged on theater. I absolutely ate every art gallery I could find. I traveled so much more than just for love, for passion, just to jump on a short haul flight. And I was telling people, I said, while we have free movement, while we have unencumbered travel, while we have the ability to do so, go do what you love and just get out and be together. And I was this very strange character last year. And a lot of the crutches, the things I relied on emotionally were also removed. So like the Australian bushfires, a lot of things I was leaning on at the time, like healers I would visit, my osteopath, my hairdresser, I couldn't see them probably since last September. And I was like, wow, they're really getting me strong to get ready to live without these things. I don't really understand. I was made homeless for several months while my house had to be torn apart. And they took me out of my comfort zone and just spun me out so fast and so far that actually I was free. By the time COVID hit, I came to Canada, and a reunion party for a company that I was in a million years ago. Those two things, I came in and the door kind of shut behind me. And I was like, well, that was that pane of glass. And thank you team. Thank you powers that be. We're here now, no brainer. I'm gonna stay here with family in this beautiful, sane, safe little town with great transport links, food from Amish farms, the electricity, or if that goes down, or if civilization crumbles. So I am absolutely put where I'm meant to be. And I was just, the lecture itself ended up being one of the first things on Zoom it was the day of lockdown, essentially. And I was just like, thank you, Great Uncle Thomas. I was just so grateful. And I know that being here, psychically so much easier. Like we're being very good to each other, and my body's been taken care of. I have family to talk to, but being alone in London, in the psychic energy of what's going on there, the challenge that people are facing, I'm like, I would have survived, but I would have felt like a bug on a windshield. I think it would have been a more intense experience. So I feel very blessed and so glad that I listened and took that little door that opened so early on. Like, it was just a lecture, it was a long way to travel.
To be clear, it was a small 1 hour lecture that you are going to fly all the way from London to do this 1 hour lecture.
Yeah.
And you were going to do
a weird choice. I'm like, it's very expensive. Middle of the year, it was one gig, and then there was a party. I'm like, oh, I'll go to the party, and maybe that's why I'm going. You don't really know why you're going, but if you listen and trust, you say yes. So I'm like, but for a whole year, I'm like, what is April 2020? Why do I did feel dread, I'm not gonna lie. I felt the tension to come and the shift to come, and the feeling of the landscape when it's kind of been taken out from under your feet. I've been feeling weird for months. So
yeah, I think a lot of us have. I think a lot of us felt something, it's not necessarily that we were predicting this, but we were feeling the shift and wondering, and I've heard that from astrologers looking at the astrology charts, and psychics from being tuned in, as well as mediums hearing from other people on the other side that are like, get ready, and you're like, what are you talking about? Get ready for what? You'll see. We're going to come back to Great Uncle Thomas for sure.
Oh, he's
we're going to go there next in a minute, but I want to hang here for a second and ask you a couple things. So number one, just in general, even outside of London and COVID, I think you've had a lot of psychic growth and awareness and spiritual growth and awareness. I don't mean to just make it about psychic, but to me, that's the same.
Yeah.
So anyway, but you've had a lot of growth and awareness and awakening and growing and learning and expanding while you were over in London.
Oh, yeah.
And in the time that you've lived there, and you've had such an incredible journey there. Do you find though that even if there wasn't COVID, that like being here in this place, do you find yourself being clearer around nature? Do you find it being more grounding, like, you know, and more, has it been impactful on you in that way?
Absolutely. Well, like I'm told most years I have to be back 6 weeks for the nervous system to heal. Like my DNA wants me here for like I usually come back in the summer anyway. I tried one year to sneak off to Norway thinking it was trees and fresh water and Canadiana. I'm like, oh, I can just go. And I had a native medicine man came in my dreams and went, you don't just belong to a country belongs to you, go home. So I'm required to be back here. And last year, the absolute privilege, I was taken in by the Stony and Kettle Point reservation for one of we're having a peace and unity celebration. And I was invited into their sweat lodge. I was given names and tobacco, and, you know, they were so glorious and generous and taught me a new level of family and acceptance. And I absolutely love the spirituality of this land and the First Nations people that are so generous to let us be here. And I'm a child of immigrants. So when my parents landed here in the 60s, they're like, well, we must go to powwow and we must thank the native people of this place who've allowed us to live here. So I count it as a privilege to work with any medicine people here and the healers that are here, that I have contacts, like the medicine women and men I work with here as well.
So I actually think the very nature of you thinking that way and being in tune that way and being raised with this idea to honor them and that they're allowing us, you know, and that's their space, causes a whole different level of relationship with the natives as well. So they respond, they know it in your energy, you know.
Yeah,
and the land knows it.
Yeah.
You know, whether you realize that native telling you, no, come back to this land, like it's not going to be the same, that's because you have a relationship with that land that's built on something different than just I was born there. You know, it's more than that.
And you say, like, the Celtic wheel and the medicine wheel are our family. Like, they come together so beautifully. And we can also talk about oppression with the Irish and the First Nations. We have a similar well, not very different, but we both have oppression and survival and identity. So we had a lot to share, and I'm just so grateful that I'm welcome, you know, every day.
So in the reemergence, more people learning to listen, you know, and learning to tune, as I say, inward. You know, and there's the obvious, and people know about meditating and certain things. And you don't have to answer now, you can sort of throw this one in the back of your head if you want for later, but any tips or things that you would say as far as people do during this time just to become more in tune themselves and for themselves? So
I mean, my guides can be a little funny and a little tough sometimes, but they said, for those that resist this time, we're going to send in the meat tenderizer. Which means they're especially talking about people with financial who praise the financial over anything else. They're saying it's going to feel like their meat's being broken down and flavored and savored. So they're being marinated to become something delicious after this, but it's going to hurt like hell for some people in resistance. So they're looking at me going, you're pretty tender. We'll let you off.
I find spirit guides are often like this. They have such a either sarcasm and funny in the images they give you, and I sort of feel like it's a couple of things. It's almost theater for them, right? Like, oh my God, you know, we're up here all the time reaching out and nobody's seeing us. We have somebody paying attention. Let's put on a good show.
My lot, especially, I don't know.
Yeah, and I find, you know, as soon as I raise the flag and say, you know, I'm open, it's like, you know, more than my guides come in, right? That's where it's easy to get overwhelmed, because it's like, oh wait, he pays attention. I mean, it's so Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost, where the room just gets full very quickly. So one of my advices for everybody is, you know, really important to set your grounding, to be grounded, and to know that you are the one who in some ways controls the antenna or the connection on this end. So you get to say, like, one at a time, this is what I can handle. Like, don't just be overwhelmed and you know, watch out for fear. Know that you can actually set your boundaries in this energetic realm.
Oh, I have a secretary. I have a secretary in spirit who takes appointments. No. I had to build an amphitheater at one point. Like, have to move that there. You know, you need your space, and you need to know.
That's so funny. I have a secretary too.
You have to.
That's hysterical.
Tell me it's kitten rimmed glasses and all the nails painted.
First other person I've ever heard that said it that way, but yes.
I actually had to. I get it.
Okay, so we're gonna turn.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about Great Uncle Thomas, right? Great Uncle?
Yeah, he's a great
uncle. And Thomas, it was T.H. What's his last name? I forget.
Thomas Hussein Nally. So my last name is Nally.
Nally, that's right. Thomas Hussein Nally. And I believe he was also a playwright, or he wrote a play. And if I remember this story correctly, I mean, this was a while ago since I heard it, but as I remember it, the story itself was an invocation. And so it's basically a ceremony or a ritual. And every time that show has been performed, shit happens.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It happens. Like not just minor. And I think that you've sort of taken on the show to help continue its journey.
Yeah.
So do I have some of that correct, or most of it, or?
Yes. Yeah. So he's an interesting man. He was a chemist, an inventor, a playwright, an anthropologist, illustrator. He was a Renaissance man in 1916-ish. And he was really interested in Celtic spirituality, pagan spirituality, and Christianity. And he may have been, and I'm still researching to figure this out, but he was a good friend of the poet Yeats, and may have been one of the early members of the Golden Dawn. So he may have been a ritual magician. We're not entirely sure. He definitely went to a few meetings and was reading some of the materials, but I'm not sure he actually how far he got into the magics. But I think he definitely went to the bookstores I went to in London, and I've accidentally followed his footsteps for years, not knowing that he was so magically inclined. So the play he wrote is called The Spancel of Death. And he was writing it about his great.
Wait, you went really fast. The play he wrote is called what?
The Spancel of Death.
I just wanted to sit on that for one moment. Go ahead.
I get excited. And spancel, it means spell. So it's a really evil spell, basically. And he was writing about his great-grandfather who had a run-in with a necromancer, which is a witch who was using defiling corpses to do really black magic, to take revenge on the English landlord and to take the power back for the people. So it was a really revolutionary play. And my uncle, being the anthropologist he was, put in actual magic. So he reenacted the spell, and it's basically it's horrific. When I read it in the archives, in my little white gloves, I actually dropped the script because I was so shocked at how real the magic was, but how gory it was. Because they actually were showing how you would take the skin from the corpse and wrap it with silks and call in the 7 planets in 1777. And it was like, oh my God, he's done it. He's put the real thing in there. And it's fantastic. I mean, to watch it is fantastic. But the day it was meant to go up was Easter 1916. And the uprising erupted in Dublin. So the actors that were meant to do the play grabbed the guns from under their dressing tables, went out to fight and die for Ireland, and the play didn't happen. And Yeats, in his letters, was saying, well, it either would have gone really, really well or really, really not, i.e. there might have been riots, it was anti-church, it was anti-England, it was half of it, well, quite a bit of it is a Gaelic, and it was so subversive in a subtle anthropological kind of way. And because one of the actors came back because he forgot his gun, he put the gun underneath his dressing table and signed back his script to the stage manager. And that's why today we have 1.5 copies of the script in existence in the Irish Library. So I went in 2016 to dig this up. And I'd always heard the myth of my uncle being the last man before the Abbey was shelled and the British set it alight and all of this, exciting stuff. And when the day I arrived, all the ancestors of those actors that had been in that play were meeting for the first time ever. And they stopped me at the door. They went, no. It's for descendants only. You can't come in. And I said, and they had the poster, and I'm like, that's my uncle. That's my guy. And they were like, who is this man? Who is this? The unluckiest man in Irish theatre, they call him, because he knew Joyce and he knew Shaw and he knew Synge and he knew Lady Gregory and Yeats, but he just had in their mind, the worst luck. And I'm thinking, maybe it was too powerful to go on. I mean, could have been a higher power. So every time the play has been attempted to put on, it's something has gone wrong. The money has fallen through. Yeats tried to put it on several years, but people were too depressed and began to be afraid of it. So it was considered cursed in literary circles and notorious. Like, people would try and read it, but not quite get through it. So it was up to me. Like, I've got this living thing. It's like electric sort of snake in my hands. And I got this abandoned Victorian music hall, gave me a grant to come and read this haunted play in this haunted place. And I gathered a group of incredible, brave Irish actors. And they really had to be from West Ireland, this tiny village. And I cast the play mostly by fate. So I walked into Covent Garden and literally went, show me where I'll find my actors. You know, and I met a man taking emails for a phone company, happened to be from the west of Ireland, from that particular town, and he was an actor. And I kind of got all my other actors through that, and friends and tarot readings. I did it intuitively as part of the joy of the play. So I never held auditions. It was all by calling it in, like stirring the cauldron and see who showed up, basically. And I got the most incredible cast of Irish actors. And
how many actors are in the show?
Eight altogether. Well, there meant to be 8. The astrologer who read it said you will have a cast of 8 until the day of the show. And I thought, oh dear God, who's going to die? And so the day before the show, we've been rehearsing, putting this together, and I'm white knuckling it because sounds in the room, things are being knocked over. Like, one actor, very sensitive actor, kept praying. There were a lot of rosaries and hymns being sung. Like, we were all on edge, but also fantastically interested. And they were so committed on behalf of my family and determined to help me break this curse. So they were in it. I was so proud of them. But the night before, the play was meant to go up. There was a huge election, and all the wrong people won. And a really bad Irish lot were joining in with the Tory party, and there was this political upheaval. And then next door to the theater, there was stabbings and terrorism. And my uncle in spirit was like, oh my God, this is just like it was, this upheaval and the violence in the street. And he was just like, not again, not again. And I'm like, we're doing this, you know, sheer determination. And it was really, the turning point was that the women in the play that suffered so hard and died so terribly and took these revenges at the cost of their own lives, I realized we had to honor them. So I got the cast together, and we gave whiskey and tobacco, as you would with an Irish lot, and flowers. We gave them 3 seats in the house, and we're like, you please watch, but will you let us complete this play on your behalf? This is your story we're telling. Will you be on our side? And from that moment on, everything calmed down. One actor did walk. They walked about just before the run. They walked out the door. They just couldn't handle it. The political upset and everything just shook him to his soul. So I restaged it 2 hours before the audience came in, and we went down to 7, which is actually the magical number in the play. 7 planets, 7 colors, 1777. It was just like, yeah, it's fine. But I stacked the audience with wizards and astrologers and practitioners and lots of heavy hitters were there. And one of them said, I knew when we got through the first 4 words that we were going to survive to the end. Oh, geez. And the audience, when it finished, they wouldn't leave. It's quite a shocking play, but they sat there with like just mouths open and eyes wide. And I actually had to get up and say, it is over. The curse is broken. You may go home. I actually had to break the spell. And I did say, curse is over. You have done it. Thank you all. I had to kind of walk some people out because it's intense. And I've done it since, and it's still intense, but it's not cursed.
Well, Aoife,
yeah.
I like adventure, and I love this whole psychic realm. So you need to stalk an audience again. Please pick me.
Yeah.
I'll even pay for my seat. I at the ceremony for sure.
No, no.
I want to be there.
You gave me great advice to do it the second time. It was much safer when we called in the directions like you suggested.
Yeah.
And
Well, I just suggested, and I remember saying, you know, the problem with the play, without ever reading it, obviously, so I don't really know this, but just, you know, what I heard from my team was the problem with the play is that there was no grounding. There was no sort of like creating the space for it to happen in a way that it could be held here and for these people, and then opened to go off and be what it is. And that the minute you do that, that would actually change the experience. And that was, I would say, in some ways, might have been your uncle's short-sightedness, was that he was getting this ritual in there, but forgetting to start with that all rituals should start with the basics, which is, you know, set your circle or set your direction, set your, you know, anchor the energy, ground it. Okay, go to work, create sacred space. So
yeah, but you'd be proud of me because like accidentally by fate, by charm, but whatever, I did the spell in the play. I did absolutely the wrong direction. I did everything upside down. I just got dyslexic. I got north and south mixed up, and I undid the spell in the middle of the play.
Wow.
And I was like, that was perfect. That was a big act of kindness on their part. But yes, your advice was brilliant, and I learned how to hold space differently since then. And I brought in more, actually, the Golden Dawn to hold my uncle and the space, and they were allowed to come and watch, and that really put pillars in place. So now it's a little less exciting in that it's not so wild, it's not so feral, but it's still really entertaining.
I'm in.
Okay. Okay.
How much did this impact your? So obviously there's been spiritual or sort of like explorers, you could say, in your family for centuries.
Yeah.
Was it a normal part of your upbringing to be connected to the spirit world? That way of thinking was a normal part of your life. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I come from traditional Irish Catholic background, which is always a bit pagan. Like, to be fair, the saints read more like gods, and you know the divine feminine is really strong, and the matriarchy.
Sure, they wanted that. Listen, they were pulling in, right, the matriarchy, saying we have to get them in over here. Let's get our patriarch in here, but we'll honor them over there, and it'll be okay. We'll make it work. Yeah. So
we'll have Patrick, but bring in Bridget, of course. Yeah. So I'm already pretty set up for a magical life, but my father, through the Nally side, my father's line, they're very clairvoyant, very intuitive, like lots of hunches. So they wouldn't call it clairvoyancy, but their intuition is sharp and excellent. And through my mother's side, I only recently found out my great grandmother worked with Banshee, she said. And you know, my mom used to brush her long white hair, and my grandmother would say, and this is the comb the Banshee gave me. You know, she would scare the bejesus out of my mom. And she said she would hear voices on the wind, and she would know who was about to die in the next village, the village over. And she would go over to help them prepare to pass and kind of be a midwife of death, and then bury them, help them pass and bury them and prepare them. And her name is Anastasia, and I never knew her, maybe because my mom was a little nervous about her, but I chose my middle name, Anastasia, at the age of 12 for my confirmation.
Right.
Not knowing anything about her, because I like the Russian princess in the Disney movie, you know, like I was like, maybe me. But yeah, so her face went white when I announced my new name, and she's like, why did you choose that? And I was like, oh, I just like the princess. But I really feel my great grandmother in spirit, when she does communicate with me, she's like, you know, you're the most like me. She's very proud, but also really hardcore, you know. So she does come in a lot in readings and such. So.
And you now probably more so than then recognize her being around when you were young.
I wouldn't have known. Yeah, I wouldn't have known, because actually growing up in Catholic school in a Catholic home, and the priests were very afraid, and I never understood, because I would have dreams, especially now that I know what my great grandmother did. I would always have a lot of premonitions of who's passing. I always kind of could see a little film reel or a little egg timer above the head, and like when my grandfather was ill. I knew the exact date his funeral would be about 8 weeks in advance. And I was like, I just knew this kind of thing. And I have dreams of people who are going to pass. And the priests, I would say, why would God tell you these upsetting things? Like, this me as a little kid, going, why would they tell you someone's going to die if you can't do anything about it? And I don't want to know these horrible things. And I said, is that the voice of God? And of course, these priests are terrified. They don't know these things are true. I'm challenging their belief system. And they say, well, that's not the voice of God. And I'm thinking, oh, are you implying it's a voice of evil then? It's really baffling when you are an innocent and these things are coming through. And I really, that was my exit from the church when they said that voice I've trusted, that was never wrong, that really guided me and cared for me, was something not of God. So I'm like, well, I'll have to find God outside this building then. Thank you very much. I'll make my exit. And my spiritual...
About how old were you?
Pardon?
About how old at that point?
That last attempt was probably just maybe about 20 years ago. And that really was my exit. And I really have not gone back. And now my family say at Christmas, I'll be celebrating solstice and they'll be celebrating Christmas. But Celtic Christmas is, it's one and the same really. So
right.
We actually get along famously because they're exploring early Christianity and I'm exploring late paganism maybe. But yeah, it's lovely. It's brought out the best in both of us, I think. So I had to leave that behind, but I love how Catholicism gives you ritual and gives you music and incense, and it gives you so much magic and so much mythology that I don't regret it for a second, but I'm so much happier in the trees than I am in the church,
Yeah, well, that's the problem, right? Putting everybody in the building and just trying to hold them there and separate them from the nature. I mean, that is the problem. The rituals and the ceremonies and the incense and a lot of what's there's a lot of beautiful parts to the ceremonies of the Catholic Church. The problem is that they use those walls to cut people off from their connection to nature, at least at certain times in history, as a form of control, right? And that is the problem.
The word religion means to tie together. Yeah. And the word spirituality means to inhale, right? So I'm like, well, there's your answer.
Yeah.
Do you want to be that or do you want to be that?
Well, I think
no brainer.
I instinctively knew that as a kid. I had my own journey with the Catholic Church as a kid. So,
okay.
I didn't think I did very well in catechism. I caused too much trouble. I just wanted to know. I was really curious. I was like, so I got a question because I'd walk down the streets and, I live in America, like in New Jersey. I'm not seeing, evil spirits everywhere and certain things. And I just was like, my question is, do you think evil would exist if we didn't talk about it so much at the Catholic Church? Like with the devil, like how many devil worshippers do you actually know? How many buildings are dedicated to the devil, that aren't the Catholic Church? And so, and I was really sincerely asking. I wasn't being like, I was super young. I started asking this, I think I was like 9 or 10 years old. I was in catechism. It was pre-communion. And so anyway, that started the trouble and it continued. Because I never accepted sort of the, don't ask too many questions, kid kind of a thing. I wasn't raised
It's a mystery. It's always a mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would say it is, but then on the other hand, I would go home and have my dreams, and I had these conversations that were happening over here, and I'm like, it is a mystery over there, but I got this other mystery I could connect into right here. I think this one's much more interesting. I'm gonna hang with that. So,
mystery. Yeah.
Anyway, interesting journey. So you then, at some point, I don't know where in your journey. Well, first of all, actually, let's start because we're actually at young years here. You said to me, and I actually learned this recently, that you started opera singing, studying opera really young. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was on stage pretty much from the age of 6, like not massively professional stuff. I did a few tours with children entertainers and stuff. And I remember like the first audition I crashed was actually me running out of a kindergarten classroom to the gymnasium where the older kids were auditioning. And I just burst in like, twinkle, twinkle, like singing my Twinkle, Twinkle. And I was put on tour really young. So, and my parents were just like, oh, what is this, this exuberance? And we were doing like Amdram stuff together. And this opera singer who was in the shows with us, it was sort of semi-pro, said that, you know, this kid needs training now. You know, I was just eating it up. I was in it. I was just ready to go. So she lived with us in our attic, and she was penniless. So she made her way here, teaching me and my sister how to sing. And I was with her from 10 to 20, working so hard, competing. I missed a lot of school for Kiwanis competitions and, you know, prize competitions. And I was competing against people a lot older than me a lot of the time. But I loved it. I was really just a natural performer. Storyteller, really. I didn't win necessarily because of my voice, but because the words and conveying the story. I was just always like so excited about what I had to say. And that was really unusual for opera, maybe, that it was more about sound and, you know, and I just went out there and I just was whatever I was talking about. And I was probably channeling, but I wouldn't have used those words. But now that I have channeled, I'm like, oh yeah, I really just stepped out of the way and just brought something through. And it was great. And I was accepted into several opera schools. And I chose to go to Montreal, and I was 18 years old when I went into the big opera training. And that's kind of what kind of had a shock, actually. I was like, oh, do I actually love opera? It was just on such a fast track. I came into this world like, oh God, yeah, now it's getting real. And I'm learning 6 languages, and I'm in this massive competition, and you know, the pressure just got real fast. So yeah,
How long did you stay in that before you?
I did 5 years at McGill Opera Performance Program, which is an intense program known for breaking people, basically. Like now it's known as a mental health risk, because at the time it was old school opera, which is if you survive this program, you will survive in the opera world, i.e. bullying, and we break you down, but we don't build you up. You survive, you know. And for a sensitive, sort of empathic, I just want to tell stories kind of person, it was like, it was way too much. It was really intense. So
5 years is actually a long time, I believe, in that program too, no?
Yeah, well, a lot of the way it was set up, most people were failing all the time because you couldn't actually pass. It was kind of rigged. So people were doing 3-year program in about 8 years was the average.
Oh, wow.
But I gave up. And instead I was like, it was so weird. I'm like, this is bullshit. I can make my own opera. I have a director friend, I have a designer friend, my best buds. We know what we're doing. And we all dropped out together, and we started an opera company. And within a year, we were hired back to the school to direct opera. Like,
wow.
They were really jealous that we knew how to make a good show and dress people well, and, you know, have a concept and help people to act. And it was like, it was so weird to have a pigeonhole after being a dropout. It was like, oh, okay, that's such a weird way to do it, but yeah.
So how do you go from opera in Montreal and your own opera company to London's West End? Can you tell us a little bit about how?
Yeah, well, I had this fantastic opera company with my 2 best friends, and we were like a 3-headed monster. We were like early 20s and just like unstoppable in a way, because we were just young upstarts. So we did a lot of Sondheim and Bernstein and Mozart and modern opera, ancient opera. It was so much fun. And we raised, I think our first full season, I raised like with them about $500,000 for 6 months, and we had staff of 35. Like it just grew really, really fast. And at the age of 25, after running like a good amount of shows and a full season, massive orchestra, and all of this, I just kind of burnt out real fast. It took everything. And if anyone has run a theater company out there, you know, like you lose your grant Christmas Day, the Boxing Day, you're looking for the next grant. We 3 of us together working in one opera company were below the poverty line, our money combined. So we were suffering to do this, and we were young, and it was kind of like, I need to play as well. I felt it was too old for how I felt. So I thought, okay, just for 8 weeks, I'm going to do a summer course at LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and Drama. I've always wanted to study Shakespeare. I've never had it in my mouth and in my soul, and I need those words like now. So I called them, and it was like a day or 2 before the program began, and you were meant to audition, and I just went, I need to be in this program. I can't come and audition. I'm in Canada. Here's my CV, and here's why you should take me. And they were like, Oh yeah, okay, whoa. I sort of willed myself into the program. So I did the 8 weeks in the summer, and I was so fulfilled after the horrible opera training and the despair and the depression and the bullying. I found acting training is about being in the body and being in the soul and having a heart and having a mind. And I was like, oh, it's not just being a mouth on legs, essentially. And I was happy. And the wisdom of Shakespeare and the esoteric knowledge in the Shakespeare plays, just, that's when my spirituality really woke up. Like, I think Shakespeare really is my first master. You know, his words, and it's packed with ritual, it's packed with astrology, it's packed with everything magical you'll ever need. So at the end of the 8 weeks, the principal took me aside and went, we need you to stay here. I was like, I have a full season of musicals and operas I've auditioned for last year. I have to go back and like have to run this. And he's like, you'll regret it if you don't. And I'm like, you're right, I will. I'll stay 1 year. I'll do the post-grad, then I'll go back. And I called the boys and I'm like, just give me a year. I'll go back. I promise. I just need to do this. And at the end of the year, they were like, you need to stay and audition and really try this for real, or you'll regret it. And I'm like, oh, but I meant to go back to my opera company. Oh, and I call the boys for our annual general meeting of, I'm staying. Okay, bye. And I've been there 20 years now. And I joke it's my 20-year 8-week vacation because, you know, I tried it for real. And, you know, I'm in London, this big, massive, you know, it is the Broadway of Europe. Wrong training, wrong name, wrong size, wrong shape, no agent, no one to vouch for me. Like, it was crazy. It was crazy, but I loved it. Because for me, the more impossible, the more likely, because you can't fail. If I don't make it in London, it doesn't matter, because it's a huge, stupid thing to try. So I'm like, I might as well, you know, it doesn't matter.
I'm going to remember that approach. I kind of like that. Let's go for something huge and stupid that it doesn't matter.
For you tarot readers, it's like the fool on the cliff. It's like,
yeah. How long were you there before you got your first West End show?
So my first summer was 2000. I ended 2001. I got out of the post-grad. I did a little bit of amateur stuff. I'm a Sondheim absolute fanatic. So my rule was, is it Sondheim? Yes. So I did a lot of Sondheim Society stuff and concerts and cabarets, and because I'd done a lot of his stuff already, I was kind of in there. But then, what was it? I was an usher in a terrible show about marching bands, Cyber Jam or something. It was horrible. It was, and you know, I was watching it 100 times in a row. And this new show had opened up down in the West End, and it was called Jerry Springer the Opera. And I thought, perfect. Yeah, notorious, right? I'd watched it. I loved it. It was irreverent. It was naughty. It was demonic. And I thought, I'm an opera singer. I'm North American. Okay, I can do this. So every ticket I would rip at this other show, I'd say, have you seen Jerry Springer? Have you seen Jerry Springer? And I'm like, I'm going to be in Jerry Springer. And I just started acting as if I was already in it and practicing the words at home and listening to the disc and going, okay, when I have my audition, and I just absolutely assumed I'd be in it. And I had no audition, no way to get an audition. And in fact, I'd pissed off a few casting directors to the point where they were sending back my CV saying, please don't come. And I listened to these, I was in a cafe and these two women were complaining about their auditions for Jerry Springer and how they had to staple their CV to the back of their photograph and how weird that was. And how this one casting director always said you had to do this. And I was like, noted. So I did that. I wrote this outrageous letter and I went, I have a high C, I tap dance, and I've been on the Ricky Lake show. You have to see me. I was like, oh, Jesus. And I sent it in. And the casting director was basically like, you got the job at the letter. Like, no one had that sort of audacious, like, I was only in the audience at the Ricky Lake show. Like, I wasn't a guest or anything. Like, I was just watching. But technically, I was on the Ricky Lake show. So I went in on a Thursday. I tap danced. I sang my high C. I wore terrible polyester clothing that one of the other girls was like I bet you can't wait to take that off. And I'm like, oh, this is just my clothing. Oh, gee. I went in on the Thursday, and I was in rehearsals on the Monday because someone had had a nervous breakdown and they needed to recover. They needed to cover right away. So I was in. Me and another girl were in, and suddenly I'm on the West End. And before the week was out, because it was such a stressful show for the voice, I was on stage with a score within a week. And because I had practiced with the disc, and I actually had it memorized going in, because I was pretending I was already in it, I was on stage before I'd been rehearsed. And it was like, whoa, whoa. And it was a big show, and the biggest thing I've ever done, like 2 hours of opera, the highest notes I could hit, the lowest notes I could hit, Arabic war cries, and expletives, like 3,000 swear words a night combined. And they're really hard on the voice. Like they're really hard. They're very percussive.
In the way that you have to sing them, right?
With the intention.
Yeah. How long were you in that? How long was that run for you?
That I did 535 performances in a row.
Wow.
18 months, and I didn't really know how sensitive I was at that point, but spiritually it was very, very dark, and there was a lot of hatred that I had to portray in it. My voice got very hard, my heart got very hard, the management was very challenging, the mental health of the cast was disintegrating. Like it was intense, and there were actual invocations to Satan and the demons that Stuart Lee, who's a brilliant comedian, had pulled from actual spell books. So again, the theme of my ancestor comes through in this misuse of magic. He threw in this actual invocation, and I remember every night just being like, there were certain bits that would just make my skin crawl, and I didn't really know why, because I was spiritually still finding myself. But that was intense. I actually had to retrain my voice after that, because it had gotten so hard and so high and so shrill.
That was going to be my question. What was your process like coming out of that? Let's talk a little bit about how long was that, and what was that process? So
yeah,
because I mean, if you're talking about those kind of invocations, but also having a lack of awareness, you're saying, and singing in a way that's better. You're actually trained to know better than to sing. Right?
And
the usual training to do it. That's a whole lot that you were sort of carrying in your body, in your tension.
An opera singer, you do maybe 4 performances with 2 days in between, so you save yourself. Suddenly 8 shows a week, you're in. I was like, sorry, what? But my throat hurts. It's like, and as an empath, what I didn't understand what I was doing at the time is I was trying to clear the space. I was always trying to clean the sick building, the theater itself, and I was protecting the cast. So I didn't know that. I didn't really understand how my energy worked at the time and where it was going. So I got ill a lot. And I would get this really serious lung infection. I would lose my voice and I'd have to be off for a week. So I had breaks that were more like breakdowns, because I didn't really understand how absorbent I was and how protective I was. And I didn't know it was an ancestral thing as well. So after that, the joy of really being in that amount of darkness and being in that shadow was that it brought me in my daily life closer and closer to light, like spiritual things. That's actually when my spiritual awakening really started to kick in, because I had to balance. So I started finding healers, seeing healers, trying meditations, trying Tai Chi, yogas, things like that, because my soul was crying out for that balance. And really, I wasn't that interested before, but it pushed me into that dark corner where I had no choice. And that brought me into getting more into nature and into the countryside, and the recovery. I'm maybe still recovering. I don't know. It was intense.
What was your next show on West End?
What did I do?
What came after that one?
So that's 2004-ish. I think, so really after that, I find I would get shows with an intention. So I'd send forward what I need after that. So after such a troubled cast, I said, send me like the friendliest, most beautiful, happiest cast. It was such an ugly show. I said, I want to feel beautiful and I want to feel feminine. Find me that, right? And I was notorious for like being able to get jobs if I set that intention, didn't get in the way. It was great. So really quickly after that, I was in this cast of Evita, the Michael Grandich production with Elena Roger. And the cast, the first 3 days of the rehearsals were tango. So what they did was they made us tango with each other, every person with every person. So the cast just, and it was such a warm, beautiful, friendly cast because we'd held each other, and the men honored the women and the women exalted the men. And that cast to this day we're Zooming in the pandemic because we had something. And that show's really special anyway, in that you're always on stage, you're always together. Like there's not a lot of backstage idle time for things to brew and you know, idle minds and all that. So we're supporting this central story of this goddess, essentially. It's another dark story. Like I seem to go into the darker side of the showbiz, but we had Argentinian lead, and she was channeling Eva. Like there's times I was looking up at the balcony going, it's a newsreel. She's not there anymore. Eva's with us, you know. And I was working with a group of Australian alchemists at the time, and they went, you're healing this. You are healing that nation. And during the run, her body was recovered and actually moved through the streets of Argentina and buried beside her husband at last. Like there was actual outside proof that our love and devotion to that story did some healing. And every show I've done, I always ask, like, what can I offer as well? What good is this for the world? You know, like, because the one just after that was a Holocaust musical based in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I was like, oh, don't make me do it. I can't lift that. I can't live in that. But, you know, Spirit are like, you're on. This needs healing.
That came after Evita.
Well, there was a tour in the middle of Aspects of Love, and that was fun to see the world, but it wasn't as profound. That was more about me learning about what love wasn't, to be blunt. But then imagine this musical written by, paid for by Holocaust survivors and written by the children of Holocaust survivors. It was a very personal passion project. Like it was so personal. And I was asked to play a survivor who survived a gas chamber, like who came out somehow. And Esther Kestenbaum, I was asked to portray her, and I was like, it's an honor, of course. Oh my goodness. And we gave a lot, and it got kind of method. People were taking on very deeply, reading diaries and letters, and it was a lot to hold. But we had the man playing the head Nazi was actually a Rinpoche. Like he would chant Buddhist chants on the stage every night and prepare the space for us. And I was doing my little bit, and we were all taking really good care of each other. And Spirit said to me, if all you need to do is 100 performances is what I understood. And they did the math of how many people that would heal, how many people they needed to send love and energy to. And I was like, 100, okay, 100 performances, fine, we can do that, because it was going to be controversial and it probably wasn't going to run that long. And the producer, Beth, she was so of the light and treated us with such respect and honor. She fought so hard for it, but the world was just against it. It was like opening at Christmas, Hanukkah. It was like a disaster. And they were calling it Holocaust the Musical. It was just like, oh
my
no.
gosh.
Yeah, and Andrew Lloyd Webber, who owns the theater, was like, you have to make $1 million in your first week. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. You know, so it was like being really, we were under an enormous amount of pressure to make this beautiful piece of theater. It was flawed for sure, but the musical lyrics were just delicious. The book needed more love. We did our absolute best with it. But it closed, we rehearsed for 10 weeks and it closed after 4. And I was furious because I could see the souls watching. I could feel the presence of the souls in the theater with us. Not a lot of audience members, but a lot of invisible audience members. And I'd be like, hello, you know, I hope this helps. And I was so depressed when we had to shut it down and so angry that we hadn't made our 100 performances. And they went, but count the days back to the first day of rehearsal. And I was like, well, it's 100 days. And they're like, well, Spirit don't care if it's a rehearsal. Like, we've been watching you the whole time. And I'm like, fine, okay, if I can offer that. but people took on a lot of weight and sorrow to make that beautiful link. Imagine this, to make it live as long as it could. But we did our absolute best. But that was heavy lifting. It was of the light, a really beautiful show.
Sometimes the work that we do is not always, all of us have to live with that, right? I think it does actually happen to every human being. I just don't know that we all find the space to honor it, but sometimes the work that we're doing isn't for the reason that we think we're doing it, or for the people that we think we're doing it for. And sometimes it's just about actually showing up and doing it, and that's enough. There's a lot of things, and Michael knows that, living with me. There's certain things I'll do that maybe will never be appreciated, seen, or visualized. That it doesn't matter. I have to do it. There's moments, and you show up for that. And if you sort of get that guidance, you don't sit there and go like, oh, is this real or not? Or, like, you show up for it. That's what it means to do the work sometimes. So very cool. I actually am going to open my little iPad here. I'm going to. No. It's actually, I just want to, so in your bio, you said psychic medium, seer, trance channel, occasional oracle. Love it. Priestess, trained in Elusian and Egyptian mystery traditions, practitioner of ritual and planetary magic, workshop leader, and celebrant of traditional Celtic Wheel of the Year ceremonies. Very cool. Landscape communicator. I want to hear about that one. And teacher, remote viewing, psychic development, and immersive astrology. So that's a lot. And I so relate, by the way. I actually purposely, I remember years ago trying to create this business card, and at a certain point I just gave up and stopped creating a business card because I just thought that looks absurd. There's just a certain point where you're just gonna be like, okay, what do you actually really do? Like, who are you really? But at the same time, I understand that this is really what you do. So my question is, can we talk a little bit about your training around some of this? I know some training, but if you could, and you don't have to sort of, I'm not looking for you to qualify anything, but just sort of curious if you could talk a little bit about your journey around all of these different. And
what they're saying to me right now is just tell them you're a tree and that these are branches, but you have a solid trunk. Yes.
I'll take that. That's a great answer.
That's true, because especially with my artistic talents, everyone's like, photography, painting, singing, songwriting, what? And I'm like, they're all storytelling, dude. Like, it's really just facets of one larger thing. So don't panic. Do you know what I mean? So,
I actually, thank you guys. I love it, because that makes 100% sense.
And if you have good roots and a thick trunk, you can have a lot of branches.
But what I still want to talk about is, it is obvious from talking about your story that, it's not like you were necessarily, you were being raised in mystery schools, but it wasn't necessarily that you were being raised in mystery schools in a conscious way where you knew that and getting training. So I guess what I was curious about is if you could talk a little bit more about learning and sort of taking the dive into this, whatever direction that started, a little bit of that.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's like where to start and how to explain it. It is a mad journey. It's an odyssey, really.
Just pick pieces.
Yeah. Well, part of Jerry Springer, part of that was going into the marketplace and tasting everything. There is that stage where you go, what is remote viewing? What is trance channel? What is? So I think that's an important stage for everyone in their development, is to try and just see what fits and take the best bits and create your salad plate from the bar, There is that. So I went through that phase probably during Jerry Springer. But then what was interesting, and this is probably the landscape calling, I was really attracted to Glastonbury, this very magical part of England. And I thought, this is during Harry Potter craze. I wasn't that magical yet. I was kind of accidentally magical. And I thought, I'm going to go on Halloween and see where the witches are and see their striped socks and their pointy hats. I went as a tourist, as you do. And I showed up. So I showed up in a bar in Glastonbury under the magnificent hill of Tor, this maybe the third chakra of the planet, this incredibly powerful power point in the planet. And I'm looking at these witches having their AGM next door, and I'm like, oh my God, I love your costumes. You guys are amazing. And they're like, sorry, costumes, what? it was just them. And so I was like, yeah, okay, this is real. And I showed up at this B&B, and this woman, she was amazing. She called herself Isis, and I showed up and she went, oh, Nelly Melba, opera singer, you are here. And I'm like, oh, okay, I do sing opera, that's fine. And she goes, I was Sarah Bernhardt, darling, come in, we have lives. And I'm like, oh God. And as a writer, as an actor, I'm like, I'm gonna play her someday, take notes. Still very much on the outside, observing this mad world, right? And she goes, I was waiting for you, it's about time you showed up. I need to go to Egypt immediately. And I'm like, okay, cool. I always wanted to go to Egypt. And she went, here are the keys. Would you run the place for me? I need to go for a month. And I was like, out of Jerry Springer, exhausted, not working yet. You know, I was like, okay, I've never run a B&B before. And this is not a B&B. This is a retreat center, a healing center. It's, you know, a ritual center. And I said, why would you trust me? You're leaving me the cash box and the card machine. What are you doing? She goes, I know you, darling. I know you. I trust you. And she literally dropped the keys in my hand and went off to Egypt. And wow. I was left. It was this incredible complex. It is the highest point on the tour you can sleep. It's actually the closest to the point. And she had a hut beyond that was even more on the ley lines, the Michael Mary, you know, some of the serious juice that runs through England. And there's the red well and the white well, and she had the blue. And she had this incredible 9-pointed crystal star made of pure quartz with a quartz below that and below that. She had amethyst as big as a armchair. And I'm just wandering around this place, just no idea what I was doing there. But I was open-minded. I had a sense of humor. People who showed up, I healed them as best I could. I took care of the money somehow, and I washed the floors. And she came back, and she's like, I knew it. I knew you'd be excellent. I'm like, oh my God, what's happened? And she goes, as my gift, you know, I wasn't being paid, and as my gift, I'm going to train you as a priestess in the mysteries. And I'm like, yes. So it began 8 years of this is what I can't believe, is that I maintained a West End career, an audition career, and a life in London while going back and forth to Glastonbury to do some of the most intense initiations, downloads, DNA activations, ceremony. And often I'd come off stage and I'd be on the phone channeling. So that's the occasional oracle. I was like off stage taking my makeup, going, okay, go, you know, and having some incredible encounters with people from all around the world coming in. Like, all you have to do in Glastonbury is sit still and wait, and people will come. It's a magnet for the best and worst of all humanity. It is like, I call it the door to heaven and the gate to hell. And you can feel when one is open and one's not. So you have to be careful. It's not for sissies, I don't think.
I've been there a couple of times, I agree.
Yeah, and I think
it's so powerful, amazing.
So powerful, right? And I don't think anyone should live there unless they're guardian. I think it should be a passing through place. But I managed about 8 years and did some work that I will never forget. Like, and a lot of it I'm unable to share because of the promises I've made. But yeah, it was absolutely incredible. And that was my main magical training. But it also, and the trance channeling there, I was channeling so much. I was under for hours on end, and I had people calling from all over the world. I had teams of people doing healing work in Egypt and Greece, and I was sending them to coordinates saying, you know, find that fountain, that person, that thing. And one of the biggest works we did is I anticipated the Egyptian revolution by about 5 days. So we had people on the ground there to help out. And we did a lot of healing work, I remember there was what was it in the Gulf when the oil spill was happening? We anticipated that slightly, and we're doing our best to help out. And we would just send healing energy and spiritual technology to help out. And it was incredible, but also did get to the point where I was so much in trance that it was harming my physical body. They weren't really respecting my body. Like, I wasn't getting a lot of food and water. I was like just working. And again, I was burning out. and bringing in these incredible ascended masters and angelics and really, really high vibrational beings. And they were like, this is not good for you. And they would give one message to the group and another to me, going, get ready to leave. We're going to take you out of this. Get ready to leave. And they were making me stronger kind of secretly while I was trans channel. And eventually I had to surreptitiously leave. I had to actually sneak away at dawn. I had to like sort of climb the wall and get out of there. And I was an asset. So it didn't end very well. And so I don't have terribly happy memories of that, but it was intense. Yeah.
But do you still maintain your connection? You're not to them.
To them, yeah. That was, yeah. And I figured.
And I have a question, because with the work, do you actually do sessions for people, or is all of the work sort of more like in group and in circle and more in a sacred like particular way?
Yeah. Well, now I'm in a process of healing from that community and that misuse of power again, which is another part of my journey and my family's journey. So it's like, I actually stopped for a while because I had to heal, and it was just too much all at once. So I've retrained again. I had to go back to square one and like, what is a chakra? I was sent back to kindergarten, and what Spirit are saying is now it's for you. It's for no one else.
Yeah, you went to mediumship school in London, didn't you?
Yeah. So I went to the College of Psychic Studies, and I started from scratch. I absolutely went to beginner. And it was so weird having been what I was, and to have that humility and go, yeah, I want to start again, and I want to do it healthy, and I want to do it for me, to take care of me, and just let all that trauma go. It was fantastic. And I had lovely teachers who could see all of that. And it was great fun in the class. Like suddenly, things would pop out in the beginner's class that were not beginner things. It would be like the whole class kind of would jump ahead a level, because it was just like, it just came back in such a lovely, healthy way. So I was really grateful to do that. And
so if people are interested, you would recommend the London Psychic School. I don't mean to interrupt, but just to set it up, because people do ask where to go and get training at times.
Sure. College of Psychic Studies. I'm teaching myself, and I think I'd be open to private sessions. I think I'm coming around to that. And I'm going to be teaching remote viewing very soon if anyone wants to play. So,
you know what? Let's pause on that for a second. How would people find out about that? Like, no website, no this. Like, how do they? Yeah, and I don't think you even have a social media for them to follow. So like, what? And we can tag on if you want. Like later, I could actually put with a podcast post, an email or something. But, but if you want people to actually come to the class, you have to give them an opportunity. And that's part of the initiation. you have to find your. Listen, I took my godson to a shaman in Mexico, and they told us what town he was in. Yeah. But he would not respond with his address or where he lived or where he was in the city. And my friend was the one arranging it, his mom. And there was a point where like we were landing in the plane and we still didn't know where we were going. And she's like, okay, we're going into this weird area of Mexico in the middle of like nowhere. And she started to freak out. And I was like, oh, that's the initiation. Like we have to do it, and we have to find him. And so we drove to this town, and I just, at a certain point we were going, I started following my intuition once we got to the city, and we were driving down this road and literally flying, not super, we were doing about 50 miles an hour, but on a 1-lane road with the trees like this, and jungle all around you. It was pretty fast, and part dirt. And we're driving, and all of a sudden I like hit my brakes, and I looked and I was like, I think he lives right there. And I forgot what was in the sun or what was there, but they both looked at me and they're like, you're crazy. Like, he doesn't live there. Like, why? Like, why would it be there? Like, why now? Like, this sudden stuff. And so I was like, okay, better. I think it's there, but okay. So I kept driving, and I drove us into the village, and the village was like these shacks, and it was like, it was so poor. It was so sad, actually, in a certain way to see. Like, literally, they had these like meat hanging with flies on it, and like it was like one of these places where you're like part scared, part like it's amazing, and we stopped, and she's like, I'm gonna ask one of these people, they have to know who he is. I'm like, okay. So she went and asked and did her best to sort of communicate. And basically they pointed down the road to the driveway that I was and said that was it. And they were like, yeah, drive back that way and point. Oh, we know who. You know, they were very nice and welcoming. And, but anyway, I was right about the driveway. But yeah. So, anyway, so you could try that if you wanted. It may limit the come, but because a lot of people might sit there being like, yeah, no.
No,
but
it's
you
true.
get serious students that way.
This is me coming out of, you know, secret work, deeply secret work in mystery schools. Like I'm not used, but you know, people have come to me, and I've actually started a small forest school with an incredible sorceress in London in a wood near my home. And we were just getting going before the pandemic. So all of this was about to emerge. And I'm running workshops with a sound healer, an incredible fire master also. So yeah, yes, I have to get my socials together basically, because Spirit are like, and now
yeah, you don't have to do anything, but think about what you want to do. In the meantime, anybody listening, if you have an interest, you know me, email me and I'll connect you if you have an interest, and I'll connect with Aoife. But if you ever want me to add a post, that's all I want you to know is I can always
that'd be
do that
great.
for you. Okay, so two things I'm going to say, just to tell everybody, if you guys have any questions just before we close up tonight, I just want to let you know there's a Q&A box here. I didn't say it early. I still don't have Lizette with me, so you know, I forget these things. I need Lizette. But there's a Q&A box that you guys are welcome to if you have any questions for Aoife. And we can ask them, but or you can just continue taking this really interesting conversation, because now we're going to go to and this is sort of my last. I won't keep you too long. This is my last subject. I just wanted to make sure we got to tonight, because it really feels important actually to me, and it was in the bio again. I just sort of went through the bio and was like, oh yeah, these are the things I wanted to talk about for the most part. Your current project, Drawing Strength. First of all, I love that it's a channeled visual art, spoken word, creative nonfiction, from the lives of great artists and how their grit and resilience can inspire us all in times of great uncertainty. What it sounds like an incredible piece for these times. But I also seem to remember that these artists were actually coming to you, that you were actually having dialogue with these artists in spirit. So anyway, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the show, talk a little bit about this dialogue with them.
So the origins of this project, I was commissioned from an album I released in 2009 to write a musical. And the producer said, can't afford a book, can't afford a movie, write an original story or find a really old story. And in my naivete, of course, I thought the songs are seasonal. They have a lot to do with cycles, coming of age, growing up. And I thought, I'll do the story of Hades and Persephone. That's a lovely story. And all the songs will fit in and I could write more songs. And I fell into this rabbit hole of this beautiful story of the origins of the season, this abduction of this woman, this sexual awakening, all these beautiful, really rich subjects. And then underneath that, I discovered the Elusian Mysteries. So this ritual, active theater / ritual, not just theater. It was immersive in that the audience would hurt with the people, would laugh with the people, would cry with the people. So I spent about 7 to 9 years of my life traveling, again, in between shows when I could, and joining secret societies and initiating myself into these rites. Going deeper and deeper, a lot of time in Greece, in Eleusis, in Delphi, in Olympus, like all these really powerful places. So this musical ended up being channeled. And when I outgrew my ability to write the music, and I didn't know Michael yet, so I had to hire someone who could write like an octet, a duet, a trio. I can write for myself, but I couldn't write for what is a baritone, a tenor. So I hired this beautiful, this composer, Fergal Mahane. And he entered the mysteries with me. So we both went really deep into this ancient magic. This predates, it's 5,000 years before the Christian church. It kind of taught the Christian church how to baptize, how to do last rites, everything. So we traveled together through this really intense, magical, artistic process. We were really, really close, bound and adored each other. and grew together. Like, it was a really challenging, wonderful piece about overcoming the fear of death, because life always follows death, and we should love it, prepare for it. We should grow up to look forward to it. And the Elusian Mysteries, the final piece of the Elusian Mysteries, as far as we can know, it is the best kept secret in the universe, but it would be a last hymn saying, never be afraid of death. This is natural, accept it, it's beautiful. So my composer, Fergal, he was 31 years old, writing astounding music, getting more and more complex, beautiful. But unfortunately, when he wrote that last hymn, he finished the last note, and in his sleep that night, he passed away. It just respiratory failure, he passed on. And very young and very shocking. And we were closer than I knew. Like, you don't really know how close you are to someone until you lose them that suddenly. So I went into this very dark place. I went into my first proper real loss of someone I loved. Like, grandparents you've never met in Ireland is a very different situation than that other half, artistically and energetically, magically. We were so deeply bound. So I went into deep shock and confusion, because a lot of what we were writing about was death, and death was our main character. And I was like, whoosh, 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 whoosh. So I went into what I like to call a state of grace. And some people call it PTSD, like some people call it shock, some people call it extreme grief, or what have you. The soul and the body just blasted, absolutely. So in that state of grace, I had such a void where he was missing. And I had this weird story of Picasso when he lost his absolute best friend and artistic collaborator, when he murdered himself in a bordello. Picasso painted blue for 3 years. He just couldn't paint anything but blue. His famous blue period that actually made him as an artist. And I went, I need to paint blue or something. What is my blue period? What am I going to do? And it was funny, in grief, my world went into black and white, and I couldn't see color very well. So I picked up a pen, and I'm like, well, artists are extraordinary people who have survived worse than this and more. Like, how did they do it? How did they create in times of extreme trauma? And the first person, because I couldn't really sleep, I was, having night terrors and extreme problems sleeping because I was afraid of not breathing, and it was very intense. The first artist that sort of showed up at my doorstep was Frida Kahlo, who of course is the survivor of survivors. Like, you couldn't throw more at her, and she couldn't have created more beauty from extreme, exquisite pain. So I drew her at night, and I put the pen down, I fell asleep, and I woke up the next day and she was still with me. So it was like, oh, I have company, someone to walk and talk with me. And that day she was absolutely with me, in dialogue with me. We were talking about the color blue and pain and her tram accident, and she kept me company. But as the sun set, she was off. And then, in comes George Orwell. I'm like, oh, I'm going to draw George Orwell. And I'm not I wasn't a great illustrator by any means. These are very primitive. They look kind of like comics. And he stayed with me for the day and was incredibly awkward and pessimistic, but that was also very useful. And then day after day, at sunset, a new one would come in. They would be with me at night and walk with me through the day. I didn't know how long this would go. I just gave in to it. I actually couldn't do much else. For a lot of the time, I didn't have a lot of physical energy or wellness. And they were incredibly good company. It ended up being exactly a year and a day, which in Celtic terms is a perfect spell, So I drew 366 portraits and spent 366 days with some incredible souls. And some artists were living. So, Tina Fey did not show up at my door, but her work did. Her humor, 30 Rock, I gorged on it and I felt like I was with her. But the ones that had passed were literally showing up. And it led to some incredible adventures, like T.S. Eliot shows up and he's incredibly awkward and he's feeling very shy and very, uptight. And I'm like, all right, we're going to see the matinee of Cats. Like, we're going to Cats. that's what we're doing today. And, they would come with me in my life, and I have this great Nobel winning, poet beside me watching his words, watching the lycra and the scratching and the hissing, and just like, but again, it was incredibly healing because I saw my moment. I was Grisabella, you know, the stench of grief that keeps the other kiddies away, and you're not being held by friends because they're afraid. And I got an extreme moment of compassion for those people that leave you in grief. And I'm like, oh, I get it. You're just afraid. It's not me. And he got a moment seeing his wife Vivian as Grisabella in that ripped coat and the terrible tights and the makeup, and his guilt was alleviated, and he got to leave having been lifted, you know, to the heavy side layer, if you will. And, you know, I just had these adventures, and they came wherever. They came to auditions, they came to work, they came with me to grief counseling. I had William Blake with a grief counselor. It's like, how do I explain the heckling I'm getting right now? Thankfully, I had a cool grief counselor who went with it, and it was wonderful. And I call it drawing strength because every day I was drawing, and every day they made me just that little bit stronger. The lessons were absolutely tiny. Like, they weren't necessarily big life lessons, but they just forgave something or smoothed something over, or gave me some of their strength. Like, you want to sit with Frida Kahlo if you think you're in pain. You know what I mean?
So Frida was the first one.
Yeah.
Who was the last one? Yeah,
the granddaddy of I call him the patron saint, because Picasso comes in at the end. And he went, so you had your blue period, how did you do? And I drew him in blue on Guernica. And actually my drawing is incredibly intricate, whereas the first one of Frida was like a child drew it with a wax crayon. But, and his message at the very end was basically, now you're your own artist of the day. And, you know, you are artist enough, you don't need us anymore. And he's tough as well. So it was like, oh, don't leave me. It was half don't stop and half I need a break. But yeah, he was sort of the patron because of that. If I didn't have that initial story of him, I wouldn't have gone into that.
It opened you, right? That's the part is that a lot of times, one of the things I love talking to you and is you talk so matter-of-factly that these things are happening, right? You don't say, you know, it sort of felt like you really kind of, and own it. And I do think, which I'd love to know how you got to that place where you were able to own it. But before you answer that, I think that a lot of times, you know, when we're led to something like by, oh, Picasso's blue period, and then we start to have this experience, it's somehow we let that invalidate the authenticity of our experience, you know, or to somehow lessen the reality, like, oh, this is something that's happening with me right now. You know, it wasn't Picasso's, you know, blue period. It was
my blue
period. That's right. And it was these things, you know. But I think that that's one of the things I just see with so many people, you know, that I've worked with as a psychic and working with different people. When those synchronicities happen, when those magical things happen, how quickly people are willing to explain it away, or put it over there, or not explain it away, but also lessen it. Well, I'm not that. Okay, you know, what are you exactly? So one, I love the honesty in the story, but also the honoring of the story.
And I'm happy for those that need to think maybe I was mad, maybe it was a grief psychosis. I'm happy if people want to think it's imagination. It actually doesn't matter. But I do have proof in that, like, you know, Gershwin Day, I didn't know George Gershwin died at 38 from a brain hemorrhage. I had no idea, but Iris shows up and he tells me this. And he's talking about, like, the last song they wrote together was Our Love Is Here to Stay. And what it means to be a lyricist left without your composer. Like, it was such an honest heart to heart with this man. And I'm like, I didn't know that when he showed up. I knew it afterwards, but I keep having these things, accurate information that's coming through, right? Whereas, and I'm blessed to be around other people with sight. Like, at my grief, well, my counselor right now, he looks at me and he goes, oh, we've got Jane Austen with us today. This is exciting. And I'm like, great, that's who I'm feeling. So I don't have to feel insane. Or William Blake, like, he's very interesting in that he did this exact same thing 100 years ago. So he had this time in his life when 78 people from the past, kings, heroes, mythological figures, came to him night after night. So he did 78 nights that he called, what did he call it? The Illuminated Heads or something. So he had this exact, and it's not actually that rare.
No, it's not.
like Rodin speaking to Michelangelo, Dante speaking to Virgil, you know, this continuum, this mandala just opened up and I went, oh, I'm just part of something much bigger. Of course, there are days you think you're insane, like I can't really be talking to this person, but it shouldn't matter if it's a part of your subconscious talking to you, then that's important too. If it's your imagination, then that's equally valid. It just happens that I have gifts that allow this.
Well, your imagination is the most powerful magical tool that you have,
Yeah.
right? Imagination coupled with your own heart, your own love, your own energy, right? That you
and past lives as well. Like if 11 women need to be Cleopatra, then there's a part of them that resonates with Cleopatra, and that's fine. Doesn't mean or there was a group soul that were her. You know, it doesn't matter. You look at why they need that, and you think, okay, it probably means you want to feel regal, or, you know, devastatingly beautiful, or whatever. I mean, she wasn't, but, you know.
Yes.
She was gorgeous.
So what I wanted to ask you was it natural for you? Were you always sort of like, did you easily take this very literal, or was there sort of a journey from going between like, wow, I think this is happening, and like, you know, to like, oh, I was just talking with, you know, William. You know, was that journey for you, or was there a journey there?
You know, I was in a state of grace. I was so wide open. I had no filters left. I had no defenses. All I knew was keeping me alive. It was keeping me well. I just had to live. Like it took away all my choices. And I was so,
That's beautiful.
So wide open. And now I'm writing the book now. So this, it's called Drawing Strength. So I made a diary of that time. It's wildly incoherent because I'm not well. And I'm writing like what hurts that day, a little bit of what they said, where we went. And now I'm taking those diaries, and from a place of wellness, I'm looking for the insight and the depth and what they actually gave me. Because in the day, I'm like, I just survived the day, hurrah. I get to do another, you know, who's coming next. So just living to draw and living to live. But now I'm looking back at the experience and honing and mining for those nuggets. What was that strength? What was Gertrude Stein bringing to me? How did I live through that day? Because she showed up. So this book, a spoken word and visual art. So I have all the portraits to show. I'm writing a chapter about 800 to 1,000 words for each person, packed, embedded with their biography, their voice, my voice now, my voice then. So they're really dense, but they act as a ritual themselves to read them out loud. They're very evocative. And some people who do read them say that they feel the person in the room. Like Isadora Duncan has been a menace to the men who read her. And they're like, can you ask her to leave now, please? And I'm like, no, you're cute, and she's staying with you. You know what I mean? So
would you ever consider doing it as a one-woman show, turning it into
I've had a producer interested. I don't know what theater's doing right now.
Well, as a one-woman show, you could potentially do it.
I could do it
online. I mean, it would be amazing, you know.
Yeah, I've been doing readings. So there's someone who runs a salon. Oh, yes, the woman I run the school with. She's running the salon, and I went as Gertrude Stein, and I read my chapter as Gertrude Stein. So I'm doing readings at open mics and sharing it. I did 2 residencies, one at the Banff Art Centre here in Canada, another in Norway, where they've given me a grant to write these diaries into something coherent. So I really want to help people. Like if any one of my days can help one person in a dark corner, you know, that would be worth all the pain, all the suffering, and all the survival. And even just like, I want to run workshops and interactive, like how to spend the day with William Blake. Like, do you want to meet him? I will introduce you to that, the essence of that man, you know, who was scorned. He was called a madman. He was disgraced. And he kept making art saying, God and the angels love it. I don't care. You know, like he's a brilliant patron to get through a hard time, you know, and how to hang out with Lee Miller and how to hang out with, you know, all these incredibly resilient people. I want to share that and get people to find their own people. You know, like maybe my list is pretty obscure. Right. There's a lot of musical theater on there. People won't know. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think everyone has access in some way to, it's like in their code somehow. I don't know. It's their pantheon. It's patron.
Yeah, well, listen, we do all have our access, right? And we are connected. And we have to remember, being one, that we're all connected is not it's not just words. It's not just an idea. It's literal, and our consciousness might be identified with this body, with this identity, with this physical reality. But if we choose to expand ourselves, each and every one of us, not just the ones that are the so-called gifted, but each and every one of us, if we choose to expand into that awareness and into that consciousness, we may find that we have friends that we never would have imagined, in people that we never might have known as humans, but we know them as spirit brothers and sisters and soul friends. And so,
well, I tell people it's love, it's resonance, and I love their work so much, and I love these people, these flawed, wonderful people. Like, I think anything you love, you can reach their frequency, you can meet and speak to it. I don't see there being a problem, and I give myself permission maybe as well, and just saying, why couldn't I speak to them? And sure, there's some I'll never resonate with, I'll never understand, and I won't be talking to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is an act of love and a privilege for them as well to come and share with us.
And also, it makes sense that a lot of them are musical theater. I mean, you're an artist. You're a musical theater artist. The other thing we have to realize is that, if we open ourselves to channel, you're likely to attract those that will relate to you, just like friends and making friends. There tend to be this connection that happens there.
You had a few weird ones that came in the side, like Stravinsky and Britain were like, you have to have Auden or we're not coming in. So like, I met some because they were on their path, and I'm like, Auden comes in with his funeral blues, stop all the clocks, and I'm like, yes, you're welcome. Let's hang out.
I mean, come on, that's fabulous. I really think it would be a really interesting, done as like a salon, done as an experience, especially given the you've been in some of these darker rituals. What an interesting idea, And I also think, as you were talking, I was thinking about, isn't it the flawed human being, the broken, bringing their best, like climbing up and moving towards their passion and like doing it because that's who they are, and not stopping. Isn't that one of the most beautiful expressions of a human being, whether they're an artist, whether they're a parent, like whoever they are, and such a great reminder for all of us. We spend so much time in so many people looking to perfect themselves, and it's, a human will never be perfect, but a human can be excellent, and so let's be excellent. Let's be excellent selves, not our perfect selves. And with that comes because in our excellence, we can feel our passion, and then our passion can be felt by others. But in our perfection, we're trying to control things about ourselves, which actually stops the flow of our authenticity and stops the flow of our passion, and people don't get to feel that from us. And we actually rob the world of the gift that we are. So anyway, I got all that listening to you. I was like, oh yeah. Okay. So sort of what an interesting way, though, to take people through a journey like that.
Yeah. So if people do want to follow, I do have the Facebook page, Drawing Strength, and Strength Drawing on Instagram. So I'll put up like,
great.
If I'm going to start doing remote viewing for people who are really wanting to get out of their own way, maybe who haven't done so much psychic work and just want to play. We're going to do some fun with that and just take the pressure off and try and land on some targets and try and have a sneaky peek around the world while it's sleeping. You know what I mean? It's going to be fun. So I'll put that up there. Maybe that's...
I mean, it sounds amazing. I would come to some of these classes.
Yeah, come hang out.
Join in, sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for being here. It's been really so much fun sharing with you. I think your stories are incredible, but also what you bring to those stories, the way that you've leaned in and allowed these things to unfold and trusted your manifestation. It does seem to me that you were casting spells at a young age before you knew what you were doing, like learning those lines and putting yourself in the show and ripping tickets, and saying, Jerry Springer, fantastic. And so much the psychic journey, the spiritual journey, which interestingly enough is so much the artist journey, right? It's open.
Art is magic. Words are power. It's like this. It's an esoteric artist is kind of an oxymoron, really. I mean, We should have access to all of this, I think. Just if we have good roots and a solid trunk, we should have many branches as we want.
And you know what? What makes the artist? You know, they're the people that actually choose to create. They give room for that. And they give room, actually, even if they don't have room, even if they suffer it, they give room for their failures, right? For their for falling on their face. So I think
the shaman is an artist. You work between two worlds, the imagination and the material, and you bring this thing through that never existed before. Like all art is ritual, and all ritual is art.
So cast your rituals, folks. You know, move your art and open yourself to channeling. And if you're not open to channeling someone else, then just open yourself to channeling something unexpected from within you.
Just play, even just pretend to channel, and you will by accident. Like just take the pressure off.
Have fun with it. You know, if you're gonna cast any serious rituals, you know, just learn how to set some energetic boundaries around you.
Not like me.
It is okay if you have a Catholic background to use Catholic saints; they will show up for you. You know.
Yeah, they're nice. Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, it's been wonderful. Stay safe up there. By the way, family, I didn't ask you. Family, everybody's well, doing okay through this?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we're doing so much Qigong. That is our silver bullet. So my mom was immobile when I arrived and now is walking 10K a day. Wow. So I don't know, in this yin state, as you say, Qigong and grounding and good food and exercise.
Yeah.
We're all really healthy.
I've been talking about that COVID is actually really asking this whole time period. It's actually saying, embrace the yin.
Yeah.
They're also yang, like get into the yin, like get into that inner space. And Qigong is a great way to support that.
I have I think I have 8 or 9 boomers. I call them boomer homeschool, and we do Qigong every day, all of us online together. And I just silver bullet for this level of shifting, changing. Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. We talked about so many cool things tonight. So Qigong, if you don't know about it, Google it. It's great stuff. And there are videos online. You can even go onto YouTube and put in Qigong. And
there's a lot of
different practitioners that come up, and you can find there's different styles of Qigong. So a great internal, it's a moving meditation.
And a great time to write as well. Like it's write about the absolute present is what they're telling me. Like even I am writing a larger book, but they're like, write about now because this time will not come again, and like put it on paper and then put it away, but just capture it, because you'll be a different person a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. They're just that immediacy is really important, they were saying. So
be here now. That's what we're being asked to do.
Yeah.
Like I said the other day, it's as if spirits put a bit in all of our mouths, like we're horses, and great spirits pulling back on the bit, saying, not so fast, slow down.
Yeah.
What you're looking for is here. It's not over there. It's right here.
There's nowhere but here and now. Yeah.
It's beautiful. That's where we're going to end. So, all right, Aoife.
Thank you.
Much love.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.